I'll join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here today. Thank you for showing up. You don't hear for the first time. I'm not going to call on you today. I just am curious. Well, welcome all the first-time people over here. Nobody else here for the first time. How many of you were nice to everybody? Well, it's only 11 o'clock, so some of you just rolled out of bed probably. And how many of you were nice to everybody today? Yesterday? I see hands dropping. Day before? Last week? A month ago? That's the practice. It's really simple. The practice is to focus on your thoughts, your words, your actions, and be kind. That's it. Buddhist teachings, meditation doesn't fix things, it doesn't solve things, it doesn't take all your struggles and problems away. It helps you realize, can I be kind to myself and everybody else in every moment? Do not look to Buddhism to be the thing that's going to save the world. Look to yourself to be the person that's kind to yourself and every person you encounter. That very simply is the practice. It has not changed in 2,500 years, and it will not change. Now you can spin that and turn it into different cultures and language and variations and schools and traditions and rituals and all that stuff, and that's all there, and it's beautiful. But at the heart of all of that is the practice of kindness. And this is really difficult to do when you're focused on judging, critiquing, and hating others. There is no place for hate in Buddhist practice. There is no place for anger in Buddhist practice. It is literally the cause of your suffering. This practice is to figure out, how do I suffer less? That is my practice every single day. Not how do you all suffer less. That's up to you. But how do I suffer less? And what I have learned through this practice is to recognize my anger and practice compassion to overcome anger. And when I have anger, or if I have hatred, I suffer. That's it. So try to remind yourself of that, please. Your anger, your hatred leads to your suffering. And this practice is about waking up to one thing, your suffering. And when you begin to wake up to your suffering, then you can begin to transform your suffering into love and compassion. And when you transform your suffering into love and compassion, you can then engage in the world in a way that creates change. But not from a place of hate and anger, from a place of love and compassion. So if anyone ever wants to point fingers, go stand in a mirror. That's where this practice begins. This practice is not for everyone. It's not to be loved and enjoyed. It's to be challenging and difficult. To see if I want to create change in this world, I must start with myself. Don't forget that. That to me has always been my understanding of Buddhist teachings, and that's what I share. That's all. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're all here. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or a chair, however you're seated, just trying to find a comfortable position, relaxing the shoulders if possible, hands are on the knees or lap if possible. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. Your mind will not shut off. It will not stop racing. It will continue to wander just as much as it always has. I will say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep, or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever is comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More things happen, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It is not necessarily fun. It is not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into this present moment and life as it is. And the present moment is often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges, things we don't like. This is called dukkha. This is the first thing the Buddha said. Life is filled with dukkha. It's filled with suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things not going your way. This is what we get every moment and every day of our lives. Some of it is extreme. Some of it is little stuff. But that's it. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else around you. But it's not running from things. It's looking at your thoughts, your words, your actions, and how your thoughts, your words, and your actions impact your life and the life of those around you. And that's it. And that's why for some, Buddhist practice is really not their thing. Because it requires you to be honest with your thoughts and your words and your actions and how that's impacting the world around you. That's not pleasant. Always. Now, if you're the one or two kind, gentle, peaceful, happy people in the room, then congratulations. You figured it out, and I'm not quite sure what the hell you're doing here. But for the rest of us who may have lots of thoughts or words and actions in our minds that don't sit so well, we have to look at that. And that's where, to me, any spiritual practice really begins. So, with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really prefer responding to questions. To those who are joining virtually, welcome again. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box there. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions.
Sometimes I see the word for others too, Dharma capitalized and some not.
Yeah.
I've heard you say ultimate truth. So would that be ultimate Dharma? It's capitalized.
It's nice to know somebody pays attention, you know? I thought y'all just show up and sleep for an hour. Yeah, so the question around seeing Dharma, sometimes with a capital D and sometimes not, and then you've heard me say it means ultimate truth. Does that mean that the capital D means ultimate Dharma? So just to kind of back up a little bit, Dharma is often considered the teachings of the Buddha, and the other way to see it is ultimate reality. Now, ultimate reality is not the teachings of the Buddha. Ultimate reality is beyond the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha was just human. He was just some dude saying a bunch of stuff. That's not ultimate reality. Right? You know, the kind of the expression that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. Have you heard that? No, well, there you have it, right? The finger pointing to the moon is not the moon, right? So think of the moon as ultimate reality, right? And the Dharma, the teachings, are just the finger pointing to it. But you can't put ultimate reality into words. And it's very hard for us to see ultimate truth because we're really blocked by our own perceptions, our own views, our own ignorance, our own critiques, our own judgments, our own analysis, our own, right? Just breaking down every part of our ego which comes into play. So it's really hard to see what ultimate reality is. I mean, for me as a practitioner, I don't set out to try to see, okay, what is ultimate reality? Because I'm never going to see it as long as I think that there's some ultimate reality to see. Sounds like a Sunday comment, right? So it's the kind of stuff we do on Sundays looking at the Heart Sutra, is that we talk about ultimate reality. So then the idea is like, okay, well, then I want to see ultimate reality. Then you're giving rise to I, self, ego, craving, desire with want, ultimate reality as being some fixed thing. For me as a practitioner, it's a lot easier to look at what is not ultimate reality. What is not ultimate reality is my perception. And what do I spend every day of my life doing? Having a perception. So I'm nowhere close to understanding what ultimate reality is. I just look at where am I not living in ultimate reality, and that's every moment. And can I come out of that by looking at the greed, the anger, the ignorance? And there's a metaphor I use a lot where you look at the idea when at the beginning we take refuge in the Buddha, right? It doesn't mean we're not taking refuge in him. He died 2,500 years ago. He cannot help you at all. So if you came here thinking that the Buddha is going to save you, good luck with that, right? The Buddha lived, he died at 80, he's gone. But what we take refuge in when we say take refuge in the Buddha is we're looking at what's called bodhicitta, or Buddha nature. And the Buddha taught very clearly that we all have Buddha nature. We are all already awakened. That's the good news, right? If you're like trying to awaken or attain enlightenment, you're already there, friends. So piece of cake, you're done, good job. See how easy that was? And so the sun, in essence, is that bodhicitta, Buddha nature. Now you have a cloudy day. When the clouds are out, covering the sky, do you see the sun? No. Why not? They're covered by the clouds. The clouds are, as the Buddha taught, three poisons, the cause of our suffering, which is the second noble truth: greed, anger, and ignorance. So we work on cutting through our greed, our anger, our ignorance with the practice of generosity, compassion, and wisdom. This in turn allows the clouds to part, cease to exist, and bodhicitta is already there. So again, to what I first spoke about at the beginning of today, this practice always comes back to where's my greed, my anger, and my ignorance. Those are my clouds that are not allowing that sun, that bodhicitta, that Buddha nature to exist. And because I'm stuck in greed, anger, and ignorance, it's impossible to see ultimate reality. Because greed, anger, and ignorance comes from one place and one place only, which is the sense of self and the ego and the pride and me, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm sure none of you ever think that way, but just in case you do. What else? Yeah.
I've been away from my practice for a while, and I'm trying to come back, and feeling like I really need to kind of get back to basics. I'm wondering if there's a particular teacher, class that perhaps focuses on the areas of suffering. If that's anything you can speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as far as, one, and I'll just say this in general because it comes up a lot, and there's other people in the room, I'm sure, that are in the same case, where people say, like, I've been away from my practice. You don't really go away from it, right? I mean, I don't want to tell you what you do. I just want to give you maybe another way to look at it.
Away from my community is maybe more accurate.
Understood. So your commitment, your dedication, your focus to it has been not so there, right? So because the teaching in Buddhism is ultimately that once you've been exposed to the Buddha and the teachings, it's always there. Sometimes we work on it more so than others, and sometimes not so much. But the teachings are there; they're in you. You get it, you understand it, and then it's just integration and implementation and the practice of it. I'm never a fan of necessarily saying like this one person or this teacher or this class is the one. And I pull that from the Buddhist teachings, which, along his journey, he had two great teachers and he left them both because ultimately he realized that nobody could cause his awakening. And I sense you get all this, and I'm really saying this for everybody, not just you, that ultimately he had to go off on his own and figure it out. Other than that, just about every class we have here and every person who leads, for the most part, is always going to be addressing greed, anger, ignorance. That's the focus. And if somehow greed, anger, and ignorance is not working its way into things we're doing here, then we're doing things wrong. So, and as far as different, kind of the way we built this place initially was always to be a space that different people led from different Buddhist traditions with different approaches. Some people love sitting with certain people and some don't. So each class is for the most part led by different people, different personalities, styles, approaches, and they just kind of see what resonates with you. But yeah, greed, anger, ignorance.
Because I kind of thought that the three poisons and the arrows were two different concepts.
Well, are you talking about the arrows at the moment the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree and challenged by Mara? Or when you say the arrows, what are you referring to?
I'm trying to recall. I was thinking of it as like an event itself, the meaning you assign to it, and then the sort of judgment that you lay over yourself for your own suffering.
Yeah, see, so the beauty of the Dharma, the teachings, is that a million people will interpret it different ways. So when you say arrows in Buddhism, I think of about 7 different stories that include arrows or teachings. That would have been the way that you read it or heard it, and it was laid out to you. But that's something that I haven't heard it that way. But to me, what you're talking about is the skandhas, which is in Buddhism the aggregates of form, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness, which really addresses our sense organs, how we perceive the world. From that perception, we create a story, and from that story, we create cravings and desires, likes and dislikes, and then we lock up that story and we throw away the key and we suffer for 30 years because we're not willing to forgive someone, right? So to me, what you're talking about is the skandhas, the way you just described it, and whoever shared it with you may have just used arrows.
I could just be remembering.
No, we're all making this shit up. None of us, and here's a reminder for you and for everybody, is that whoever is sharing Buddhism with you, they're all making up stuff, right? They're all doing their best job to interpret these enlightened teachings from somebody they've never met that lived 2,500 years ago. And they have read endless translations and descriptions and teachings and explanations and sat with so many different people that have shared with them. And then they sit in front of all you and start rambling at you. And you might make the mistake of thinking, oh, that person knows. No, they don't. Right? They're just sharing their unenlightened view of the teachings. So always keep that in mind. Some people are better at teaching math than others. But that doesn't mean that, they're enlightened beings. They just know how to do math. They suffer just as much as anybody else does. So, yeah, I see a hand in the back.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
My understanding is that I believe the Buddha had created the Buddha, there were 3 ages of the Dharma. And from what I understand, we're currently in the 3rd age of the Dharma, which is decline.
Yeah.
And can you speak about that? Why do you believe that the Dharma is declining today? And
Yeah.
about humans,
So the question is around that you have heard or read or somewhere learned that the Buddha talked about 3 ages of the Dharma, and that the kind of technical historical teaching is that maybe we're in the final age of the Dharma, and what do I think about all that, right? So there's a couple different teachings around this that I'll reference from my understanding. One is that yes, that there is kind of this final stage of the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. And you mentioned the decline. I don't think I said that, but that we're in the decline of it. So I'm going to kind of combine a couple different teachings that I've learned, on my journey. One is that ultimately the Dharma, the teachings, the Buddha, all of that stuff will just fall away because, again, kind of coming back to the finger pointing to the moon, that it's just not necessary, right? You ever had like an hour in your life where you were just absolutely selfless and filled with love and compassion for everything and everyone and just made you and the world a happier place? Never? Anybody? All right, a minute? Maybe an hour was too high of a threshold. So, ever helped somebody? Let me simplify. You've helped someone, right? And it wasn't about you, it was about them. Yeah? So imagine being that way, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If we are that way 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we don't need to open up a book about Buddhism. We don't need to talk about the Buddha. We don't need to look at these teachings about, how to make ourselves healthier and happier, to make the world a better place. We're already there. So by that means, the teachings just fall away. They all fall away because then the teachings are not ultimate reality, right? The teachings are just there. As far as the declining age of the Dharma, even when I heard that, it was then followed by what they call world systems, right? This is Indian cosmology for those who are interested, and that we are in this world system that Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, was born into. But even around this declining age of the Dharma, what was taught to me about that was that immediately after that teaching was that, but kind of like, but wait, there's more, right? There is the into Shita heaven, there is Hotai, or this Maitreya Buddha, who will be reborn to continue the teachings of the Dharma. So, if I had to kind of translate what you said from the way I learned it, which again doesn't make it right, is that Siddhartha's teachings, this is the final age of that, and then Maitreya will be born from Tushita heaven to continue the teachings of the Dharma. Now, when I say the final age, we're not talking about like months or years. Do you know what a kalpa is?
1,000 years.
Something like that. So you've read your stuff, right? For those who don't know what kalpa is, there's kind of a kalpa is like it's a long freaking time, right? Imagine the story I heard was imagine you have just a huge mountain, and every year once somebody flies around the mountain with their cape, brushing the side of the mountain. And they do that once a year. The amount of time that it would take for that mountain to cease to exist, with this person flying around the mountain with the cape on once a year and gently brushing the mountain, the amount of time it would take for that mountain to cease to exist, that's one kalpa. So, even when I hear the declining age of Buddhism, we got way more than 1,000 years, But like I said, the good news is Maitreya is just hanging out, ready when we screw it all up. But we're a long ways from that because there's a lot of beautiful, wonderful, kind, compassionate people in this world. Yeah. What else? Hang on, there's a question here. So the question is, it seems lately that hatred and bigotry is growing. I'm finding myself struggling and fearful. Finding it very hard to quiet my mind and be hopeful and kind. Any suggestions? Yeah, two things. One, literally just rewind and repeat the very first thing I spoke about today for 10 minutes. The second thing is, and the joy of knowing the people who are asking the questions, you've been asking the same question for 10 years. Truly, and I mean that with all the love and respect in the world for you. And I hope your knee's doing better. But, the third thing is that there has always been, to use your words, hatred and bigotry. And the reality is there probably always will be. Buddhist practice, there's no place for that. The place is to have love and compassion for all beings in all times in all directions. Without getting too far into it, you've heard my story. I grew up as a bully, just a really mean, terrible person. And when people were mean and terrible to me back in response to that, it just made things worse. When I actually started to feel love and compassion for myself and from others and allow that to exist, then I changed. So when people bring hatred and bigotry and anger and violence into this world, they don't need more hatred and anger and violence. They need more love and compassion. The hard part is your ego doesn't want to do that because your ego hates them back. And when we hate people, we're just cycling this vicious cycle of hate. They hate us, we hate them. Then what? So the practice to your question is finding it hard to quiet my mind and be hopeful of any kind. There are hundreds of millions of wonderful, kind, beautiful, compassionate, loving people in this world. That's the practice. Everybody needs love and compassion. Humans, animals, the environment, everything we're in needs love and compassion. And we have two choices every day. We can focus on hatred and anger, or we can focus on love and compassion. For me, most of my life focused on hatred and anger, and that led to depression and misery, and that life sucked. So again, the practice to overcome your hatred and anger towards those that you see having anger and hatred is to practice love and compassion. Spend more time, if you love dogs, watch more dog videos on Instagram. Watch puppies. If you love cats, watch kittens. Whatever you love, put your attention there. Your mind and heart must focus on love, not hate. Because if you focus on hate, how are we different than the people that we are perceiving to act from hate? Hate is hate. So that's the practice. Doesn't change. Never has. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm new to all of this, and I think my understanding is we don't want to completely get rid of our ego, I think. But for people like myself who struggle with self-compassion and a sense of self, what would you recommend? How would you recommend going about relationships, making choices, decisions for yourself when there already is like a lack of that, where you live life making sure everyone else around you is okay, so you feel like you're okay?
Right. Yeah, no, great question. And I'm glad you clarified at the beginning, because something I said earlier, for anyone who might be new, may have made it sound as if the ego is just going to someday go away. That's not happening to any of us, I'm sure, anytime soon or ever. And for me, initially, early on in practice, I initially thought that, I'm going to shatter my ego and destroy my ego. And I spent a year or two focused on that. That was the most ignorant, egotistical thing in the world, hey, check me out, I have no ego anymore. That's just, that's not the practice. So I want to talk about that first. So I appreciate you pointing that out. And the ego, for me, that can be used in a positive, healthy way, right? There's a great teaching, Zen practice, that says Dogen would say, you must get to know the self before you can get rid of the self. But again, that teaching around non-self doesn't mean we're going away. It doesn't mean we cease to exist. Get to know, and I'll get to, I think, the heart of what your question is at, but I want to start here. Get to know that sense of self, that ego, that pride that we carry, because that's important. And that feeds, to your question, the decisions that we make. Now, when we're one who maybe already doesn't have a sense of love and compassion for themselves and gets lost in making sure everybody else is okay, which sounds a lot like me 20 years ago when I started this practice, my master said, go help people. Continue to help people. Every single day, help people. And I understand that what you're saying is that, at least what I'm hearing, is that you don't have that love and compassion for yourself, and you're kind of in a codependent way. I don't want to turn this into therapy. Most of you have that already. But in a codependent way, you're kind of relying on other people's happiness for your happiness. Their happiness is their happiness. Their misery is their misery. What's missing is your happiness, your joy. So the practice is to sit with yourself and say, what do I enjoy? What do I love? And stop trying to fix and save and heal and help everybody else. They got their own mess. So in the practice of helping people, even though I just said stop trying to fix, save, and help everybody else, in the practice of helping people, have you ever helped someone? How do you feel when you do it?
Feels good.
Feels good. Do that more. Continue to help people, because it makes you feel what? Good. And the more we feel good, then maybe we'll have more love and compassion for ourselves, maybe a greater sense of appreciation for ourselves. We tend to be the hardest on ourselves. And, this comes up a lot where people, talk about being selfish. It's okay to say it this way, selfish, meaning make sure you're taking care of yourself. Because you matter, you are important. And if you truly do, which I believe you, love to see other people happy, then you want to stick around for a while. And the happier and more joy you bring into your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, then the easier it'll be to continue to share joy and help others. But take some time, kind of the last thing I'll say is, take some time and maybe, now I'm going to completely contradict everything I said, maybe just forget about everybody else for a while. Like, leave them alone. Right? In kind of monastic Buddhist practice, that's a big part of it, is you isolate yourself. And I don't mean in like this miserable, depressing, I don't want to get out of bed type of way, but really focus on you. Everybody else will be just fine without you for a little while. I know that's hard to believe. For a lot of the helpers in the room, Mr. Rogers style. We want to help people, but you got to help yourself a little bit. Right? On an airplane, the oxygen mask falls, and what do they say to do? Self first. So, give yourself some oxygen. I think, and then we'll go there. Go ahead.
So, going back to the previous question, and about the hatred and the...
Yeah.
Is it okay, and that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to cut off the news, which just produces more anxiety or hatred. So in a way, ignorance at times is bliss. And focus on other things which I can help you.
Yeah, I think the question is around, going back to the last question, what you're saying and what you're asking is that for you, and you kind of mentioned this idea of ignorance is bliss, is it okay? You're saying, is it okay? I'm never going to tell you something's okay or not okay, so we'll just start there. You're on your own. But what you're asking is it okay to maybe just shut off the news, kind of ignorance is bliss, if it's impacting you, things like that? Regardless of what's going on in the world, I'm always a fan of less news is better. We don't need to watch 5 hours of news a day. We can watch it for an hour and know what's going on. I'm also always a fan of, sexism, racism, homophobia, all these things. This is not okay. This is not Buddhist practice. The Buddhist teaching says, love all beings. Now, so the reason I say this is we want to caution ourselves, for those who might be new, that yes, if you're watching 4 hours of news a day, you can probably watch an hour and still know enough of what's going on and be okay. But I don't want anybody to think that ignorance is bliss means we're closing our eyes and turning our back on what's going on. Hatred and anger in the world is not healthy. And if we ignore it, there's no wisdom to that. There's no compassion to that. To remain silent, I'm just rambling for everybody, not for you. Just as a reminder, this practice is not about being silent. This practice is not about ignoring what's going on in the world. This practice is about, to me, engaging, as Thich Nhat Hanh taught, engaging in society, engaging in the world, fighting for what you believe in, so we live in a kinder, gentler world. This practice is not passive. This practice is not, I'm going to stay in my little Buddhist bubble and everything is fine. No, the world's on fire. But work on yourself first. Have love and compassion while you create change, not hatred and anger. And we must have our eyes open to be able to see, and I know this isn't even towards you, Normal, but we must have our eyes open to see what's going on in the world and not ignore it. For me, with every privilege in the book sitting here, I could ignore everything and live in my perfect little privileged bubble. As a heterosexual, white, able-bodied male, I'm golden. Nobody's oppressing me. Nobody's coming after me. I'm fully protected. So it'd be really easy to just sit in my little bubble and say, good luck, folks. I'm just going to meditate. Leave me alone. No. To me, Buddhist practice is incredibly rebellious, incredibly active, and incredibly engaging. But don't be an asshole while you're doing it. Yeah.
The only thing I wanted to add was, you do locally what you can do.
You do what?
Locally around
Yeah,
you.
sure.
And things you cannot change, you just ignore.
Right.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a hand in the back somewhere. Yeah.
Josh, thank you for leading this morning, Jeff.
Yeah.
And, I think one thing for me right now is that I've studied enough where I'm kind of like, okay, I know the goal is present state awareness, right? That being right here in this moment is really one of those goals and part of what we talked about. And then we're in that present state moment and we're feeling we're feeling good, we're feeling connected, we're feeling grounded, but I got into a place, somebody mentioned I think she was really referring to like the second arrow, like that the first arrow is this pain of like getting an injury, and the second arrow being, everything that you put into that thought about, oh, it hurts, and who shot it, and, and the idea is like, who cares? Move on, because the arrows are already there. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm having a little, there's a question in here, which is, is there something in Buddhist practice that's either suggested or something that was done in the past for reviewing things that have gotten you to the place you're in, if you're not comfortable with the place you're in, or if you're not feeling content with the place you're in, or maybe it's even that part you said about you're not feeling joy all the time because you're not doing joyful things. And is there a way in Buddhism to look back and kind of do an assessment or an evaluation or something like that?
Yeah. So let me kind of paraphrase that or not and just ramble, and I'll close with this thought. The reference to the arrows and what you're talking about, and yes, that's again another one of the arrow stories. Is, for those who don't know, it's called the second arrow. That the first arrow is I've been shot with an arrow. The second arrow was trying to figure out who shot it, where did it come from, why did they shoot it, what's going on behind it. And the teaching is just, you got shot with an arrow, pull it out. In other words, when you're angry, just be angry. But when you're angry, often you're angry and that leads to sadness. Now you're angry and sad. Now that you're angry and sad, you are depressed. Now you're angry and sad and depressed. And now that you're angry and sad and depressed and isolated, you become lonely. So now you're angry, sad, and depressed and lonely. The first arrow was just anger. When you're angry, just be angry. Right? My favorite Zen teaching, when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep, when angry, be angry. But let's not add all the additional arrows to it. And the question you're asking around that is, is there something to do when you find yourself, what I heard you say was almost sounded like that this idea of staying present, that's such a dangerous thing to throw around. And I say this for everybody because every book you read is going to be stay present, be here now, stay in the present moment. Like, come on, folks, we're not there. We're not there. You're not going to be there anytime. Well, I can't speak for any of you. I'm not going to be there anytime soon. I have no idea what this present moment is like because as soon as I focused on the breath for 1 second, my mind is gone. And I have to bring it back to the present moment. And then a second later, my mind is gone and I have to come back to the present moment, right? So maybe I'm just a terrible meditator and have no idea what present moment is like, but I'm nowhere close to being in the present moment. My mind is focused on what's happened in the future and what did I do in the past. And that's what I'm hearing your question say is it okay to look in the past? And I'm almost hearing your question as if that being in the present moment means you shouldn't look in the past. You can't ignore the past. We must learn from our past. This practice isn't about staying in the present moment, meaning ignoring the past or not being concerned about the future. Right? You all want to go home today? Or wherever you got to next? We have to think about that. Do you all want to know why you're hurting? We have to look at the past. We can't just, again, present moment is not ignoring what's happened in the past, nor what's coming in the future. But to me, what present moment teaches us is in this present moment, can you change anything that happened in the past? No. So all the anger and hatred that you have from the past and the people you won't forgive and all the stuff that's happened to you, you can't change it. Learn to be at peace with it in this moment. And as far as the future, we don't know what's coming. There's only one way to determine what the future will bring, and that is what? Your actions and what you do now. So the practice of being present means in this moment I'm going to focus on what are my thoughts, what are my words, and what are my actions so I can have an impact in the future, right? Those of you who are around my age or older, remember those Choose Your Own Adventure books, right? To me, Buddhist practice of staying present is like a Choose Your Own Adventure book. The difference is in life, you can't always go back to page 17 and make a different choice because you're stuck. So don't ignore past, don't ignore future. But past is gone and the future is not here. So, and continue to work on being in the present moment as much as possible. And if you all get there and figure out how to do it, let me know. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Shirley Tam during her time of rebirth, and to Danny and their family and friends who suffer at this time. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, a few announcements before y'all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We take our unenlightened views of Buddhist teachings and we put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. As I mentioned earlier, every night different people lead from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do, I still think, one of the best things around here. It's a food redistribution program. So we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks, prepare sandwiches and feed people who put their head on a sidewalk every night to go to sleep, and hopefully it tends to put things into perspective and have, provide a sense of gratitude for you, for all you have in your life. If it doesn't work, keep doing it until it works. Other than that, we do have this will be our 15th annual Thanksgiving Day food redistribution program. So it's like our normal Thursday, but times a lot. And it'll be Thursday morning, 10 a.m. You can go on the website, you'll see the stuff there. But same thing, we'll be doing peanut butter and jelly, but also we'll have more socks, we'll have ponchos, we'll have feminine hygiene products, we'll have hand sanitizer, stuff like that. Again, all this info is on the website. There's a flyer out there. But Thursday morning, 10 a.m., anybody wants to show up, we'll prepare stuff here from about 10 to 11:30, and then we head downtown from about 11:30 to 1. Same as always, we'll carpool. Like I said, it's no different than a Thursday. It's just a lot larger. So you're all welcome to join that. And then if you have festivities or whatever going on the rest of the day, then we're pretty much done by 1 o'clock. Otherwise, this Wednesday night, Brother Michael, who was a monk under Thich Nhat Hanh, who was actually Thich Nhat Hanh's attendant for a handful of years, he canceled a couple weeks ago. He'll be back. He's taught here on and off for many years. He'll be back Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. He, about 5 years ago, left the monastic life to become just a lay person, non-monk, non-nun, because as a veteran, he wanted to serve the veteran population. So now he works with the VA serving the veteran population. So he'll be our special guest Wednesday night. So thank you all. Buddha for you is downstairs if you need anything.